Hello, team. Welcome to my session on Coffee with Prabh. And today we have another session on Krish with Cloud. No need of introduction. We did the session with Krish on multiple topics. And today we're going to discuss about storage and associate security, which is a part of our new initiative where, I'm trying to onboard more and more industry consultant who share their wisdom, who share their thoughts about their particular thing. And by that video, I want to create a value, and Krish is also on the same mission. So I thought, let me disturb him. I'm sure Krish will not feel bad. He's my brother, and brother is there to support. So that's completely okay. Hi, Krish. How are you?
Hey Prab, yeah, everything is going good, and yes,
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much for things. So yeah. So how's things going on?
everything is fine. Like now as we are exploring new and new topics, and we are trying to make videos that feels actually good, so that we can
Okay.
basically share things more better to the participants and all. Instead of simply just explaining about the routine things, we are able to explain things more in a productive way to people, and that's always going to make a change. What for sure.
Uh-huh. So Krish, today what is special?
So today we'll discuss about the cloud storage services and
Uh-huh.
basically how we can utilize that and what are the benefits and all the kind of stuff.
Okay.
That's what we're going to discuss. And like we'll start with AWS, of course, like as we are planning for AWS specifically, and hopefully we'll be coming up for the session for Azure and other cloud platforms as well soon. But
Mhm.
today we'll go for AWS storage services.
So what is the special about this? How it works. So what we going to cover today?
So basically, we are going to cover about the overview of the common service in AWS, like how do I choose a proper cloud storage service, and what is the benefit we get from each service, and what
Hmm.
is the example use cases, etc. is what we're going to discuss. And I'll show you some examples also on the cloud console. But to start with, I just wanted to give you an idea on that. Normally, when we talk about the word called as a storage, or when we talk about storage technology in the on-premises, we are always talking about this NAS, DAS, SAN, this SAN clusters, RAID, and those kind of stuff. But how it is different in the cloud platform, and what is the benefit we are getting if you go to the cloud on that? That is what we are going to basically discuss on this particular session.
Okay.
When you go to any cloud platform, like it can be Amazon or Azure or any cloud platform, you are getting all these particular storage capabilities in the form of a service, and that
Okay.
services are basically on different types for different use cases. And
Hmm.
that is why now almost 80% organizations are utilizing some kind of a cloud storage for
Oh,
sure.
that's great.
Yep.
Okay. And how it's special, like how this is will be the special and all that, how it works. So can you
So
just explain me from basics? Yeah.
indeed, for sure. So basically, when you go to an organization, we don't have a single kind of a requirement. Like for example, some people want to have a storage for just for storing their backups. Some people want to have a storage for storing their operating system and hosting their applications. And they want to have different performance requirements. Sometimes they want to have very lesser performance. Sometimes they want to have the peak performance available. Sometimes they want to have a shared storage for the business requirements.
Hmm.
Sometimes they want to go for a hybrid storage. So for every use case, the cloud service providers are now capable of providing different kind of a storage service for that. For
Okay.
example, if I want to host an application, I have the best thing called as a block storage, or we have a volume storage. In AWS we call it as EBS. In Azure we call it as Azure Managed Disk.
Hmm.
Like this, for different vendors, we have different kind of a services for that. If I want to store some website backends, if I want to store some databases, for all these things I have different storage cases. But
Okay.
understanding how to choosing this particular storage service is the most important thing we have to keep in mind actually.
So, but it is a common thing, right? So if you go by the, we can buy any storage, because if we talk about the disk that we use within the system,
Okay.
it's same, right? It's just like a same, or is it
See,
is it different? Yeah.
the underlying architecture is always same, like the same way you have an on-premises SSD or maybe a SAN cluster with SSD, the
Hmm.
same way you have it in the cloud as well. They also have a data center where they have these things, but they
Okay.
are not directly providing you the storage, but they are providing you this with different capabilities, with different pricing models, and with different features
Okay.
in the form of different services. And like you may have heard also, probably, there is a lot of companies are now getting back from cloud to on-premises.
True.
The major
Yeah, I heard about that. Yeah.
means this is the see, if you analyze the reports which is basically happening at that time, you can see that the major reason why they fail their cloud strategy is because they are unaware of how to choose the proper cloud service. Like for
Yeah.
example, as we said, we have 10 storage services in AWS, or maybe 20 services in AWS, but which is the best one for this particular requirement, and how do I manage my data in it? How do I make sure that my data is properly secured? If they don't understand this particular strategy properly, obviously the cost will increase. It can increase
Definitely.
more security threats. It can lead to DDoS attacks. It can lead to many challenges.
True.
So that is the first thing. So we have to understand how to choose a proper storage solution in cloud.
That's great. Okay.
In fact, we can
So,
discuss about some criteria also, like on that.
okay. So how are we going to proceed with that,
Yeah, I'll just give you some, a simple idea regarding this process. First of all, this is the key criteria which I feel that the most important things we have to keep in mind, or which we have to consider while choosing a proper cloud storage. The
Okay.
first factor which we have is basically what we call as a protocol. In the sense means, like for example, now I'm saying that I want to have a storage which I can directly connect to my Windows computer or Linux machine, or maybe I just want to have a storage which I can directly connect to my operating system. In that case, I will definitely go for something called as a EBS volume or a volume storage.
Okay.
If I want to have a storage which is accessible only via API calls, I just want to access them by API calls, I can go for a object storage. If I want to basically have a shared storage like a NFS share in my on premises, we can go for EFS. Like we have a protocol is one major thing which we have to keep in mind. What kind of a protocol we want to use? I'll give an example. I'm not going to explain the architecture in detail, but let's suppose that we have a platform called as a Netflix. So Netflix want to host their application. So what we do is that Netflix website and everything, we can host it in things like Amazon EC2, EBS volume, etc. But you have a millions of movies and video files they are having, and if they plan to store all these files in the volume storage, obviously they will be in trouble, because it will increase the cost, it will increase technical liabilities, it will increase the security challenges and all. So what we do for storing that videos only, they go for the object storage. For storing their applications, they can go for a volume storage. Like the same way, we have to choose the proper requirement protocol for that, whether it's a API call based, whether it's a OS based access, whether it's a shared storage. That is first thing.
Okay.
The second thing is that now, even if I say that I'm going to cloud platform, most companies are now utilizing a hybrid cloud strategy. So what happens now? Let's suppose in my company, I am having a whole lot of Linux machines, Linux servers I'm having. So I must have a storage solution which can support my Linux systems, or maybe
Mm.
let's say Apache Lustre, or Windows file server. So based on the kind of client I'm utilizing in my on-premise or applications, I have to choose the proper storage. That's the second thing, client type. The third one is always, like that is something which is
Performance.
a baseline for everyone.
Do you
Performance.
think the performance is the most important criteria?
See, it's indeed important, but it's like, as important like the other things also. And performance is very important, as you're saying, because see, I'll give an example. Now, if you go to any storage, either cloud or on-premises, we have a baseline called as IOPS, input output operations per second, for choosing the performance of a storage. So higher IOPS means more performance. When you basically go to a cloud storage, we have to properly choose the storage based on the performance requirements, because this is one challenge which I have seen in one of my previous clients. That so I have went to a company where very long back, I have went to a company where they have a whole server hosted on AWS and everything is working perfectly fine, but the cost is comparatively high because the
Mm.
architect has done something. So after analyzing thoroughly, I have realized that instead of using a baseline, very basic storage for their requirement, that architect was using a very high-end storage with a very high level of performance, which is not required for the company.
True.
It's like we have to. It's not like we see. I want to buy a car. It's all not always I want to buy a Ferrari, right? I can always go
You
for
can
as per,
buy.
yeah, indeed, for sure. I can choose that based on my business requirements.
True.
Like the same way, performance is something which we have to clearly understand. What level of performance my application expect and how much we want is one major factor, like you said, when choosing a cloud storage. Then obviously the fourth one is migration strategy, where we are thinking about, like when we are moving to a cloud platform, so there is a legacy architecture we are having on premises. So we have to choose kind of storage which can support this legacy architecture. That is called as a based on our migration strategy.
Okay.
Then the next one is very interesting as a cost. The cost will seriously differ according to the storage. That's also a major factor. Like for example, now I'm going to a storage called as a EBS. If I store some 1 TB of data in EBS and if I store some 1 TB of data in S3, both are two different kind of storage. The cost will be entirely different. It will cannot be compared. Like it's two ends actually.
True.
So cost is one major factor which we have to clearly understand based on the region we are hosting when we choose a cloud storage.
Okay.
And the next one, in fact, for people like us, probably, that is one major thing which we always talk about, like, the BCPDR requirements and all. For example, if you normally go to a cloud volume storage of a cloud service provider, they are only hosted mostly in one particular availability zone of a one data center. But at the
Yeah.
same time, when you go to object storage and a generic object storage, they replicate to multiple zones in the region. That means it by default offer you with the disaster recovery and high availability as per your
Hmm.
business requirements. But
Yeah.
choosing the proper storage is super important in this particular scenario, where you can go to the cloud service provider documentation, whether it's AWS or Azure, any kind of a scenario. You can go to the documentation and see how much is the default replication they are doing, what else we can do as a manual approach on that. So all these things we clearly understand, and then only choose the proper cloud storage.
And I think now from a ransomware perspective and all that, this
Mhm.
this basically most important part. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Security or BCDR.
Yeah. Yeah. BCDR.
Indeed, for sure. Indeed, for
Mm.
sure. See, like for example, I'm now, no company can basically is immune from this ransomware attacks, and also obviously we must use a storage where we have a proper replication strategy, where we
Mm.
can do a manual replication also as per our requirements, making sure
Mm.
that if there is any attack happens, not only ransomware, it can be any attack happens, we will be able to have our data handy with us to recover safe and sound. That's indeed for sure.
That is why we need to see the overall perspective. How the overall activity is working, and not only the availability, but we also see the accessibility of the content, and we also need to see the enhancement of the content. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Indeed, for sure. For example, now I want to make sure that my data is properly classified, and also I am using a DLP solution there. So
Mm.
for DLP, which all cloud storage can support the DLP, and how much it can support the DLP to do their activities, what level
Okay.
of control we get, what level of visibility we get. For example, for compliance, talking about any other factors, we need to get a visibility over that, and that visibility we can only get if we choose the proper level of storage for our requirement. That's it, for sure.
That's great.
Yep. And the last one is, indeed most interesting, all security for sure. Because see, when you go to on-premises or cloud, at the end of the day, it's just someone else's data center. That's a joke which
Mm.
we always see, but that's the truth. It's a fancy word. We use the word cloud, but at the end of the day, it's a data center. They are also
Agree.
prone to attacks. It can be the person inside the data center. It can be the cloud service provider itself. It can be your employee. At the end of the day, it can be external person. At the end of the day, there is a chance of attacks, which can be, we can always expect. We always think the
True.
worst case scenario.
True.
So in that case, what we have to do, we must be able to put the proper level of controls like access control, encryption with a proper key management, continuous monitoring, replication, redundancy. So all these things are most important for us. And for example, if you go to AWS EBS or AWS of volume storage, so that offers a different kind of a encryption mechanism, security mechanism. If you go to something called as object storage, there also we have more options for securing our data and encrypting our data with the different options for managing the monitoring and all. So choose the proper storage and ensure that security requirements or security capability is provided by the cloud service provider is able to satisfy your business requirement. That's most important for sure.
Agree.
Yep. In fact, I just want to add one more thing as a part of it. Now, I will just, I don't want to share the link here, but I'm just telling you something that if you Google it, S3 attacks, just if you Google something called as Amazon S3 attacks, you will find that almost, every year you will find at least 10 cases in the Google they have
And I
mentioned.
was I was about to ask this question, like why?
Yes. And see, that is the reason. If you see that page, you will see that like millions of this 10 million customers' data is leaked, 1 million customers' data is leaked. Like, they are keeping on providing this kind of links with
Mm.
different attacks. The major reason is that misconfiguration. Misconfiguration is the biggest reason for the same. Because
Okay.
see, now in S3, there we have many controls. If you go to Azure, we have many controls, but people don't know how to utilize which control and where to implement this.
True.
So that is the major reason. Misconfiguration is I will say 80% attacks which is happening is because of the misconfiguration. Obviously that is something which we have to mitigate effectively, otherwise, or we have to manage effectively, otherwise, it's not possible to have a security. Like we have to have a continuous monitoring, we have to have a proper baselining and security training and awareness. All these things are most important for us to make the to avoid this
And I think
misconfiguration.
we also have some other perspective, like how you validate, and we also need to have a storage review perspective and everything, by which we can able to check. Like we also call it as a cloud security hygiene, something like that.
Indeed, for sure. Like for example, now if you go to, I will just add one part of it. Like for example, from the creation part of data to the data deletion, we have a whole process there. In fact, I learned from you, Prab, like when I was a part of your CSSP batch long back, I have heard that you're saying that how much more data we are storing, that much more liability is coming to us. Like for example, I'm
Agree.
storing some data which is not useful for the company, or which is not at all required for the compliance. So that means I'm having some liability coming there. So in the cloud also, it's basically very important. I'm storing some data there, and if I'm not, having a proper classification mechanism, or reclassification mechanism, or data, proper data hygiene or data destruction mechanisms also as a part of it, it can be a challenge. So we must make sure that we configure something called as a proper life cycle policies there, to make sure that our data is properly removed once the requirement is over. We have different criteria for defining that, but any which ways, we have to make sure our data gets automatically removed once the life is over. Once we must be able to ensure that our data is completely removed from the cloud platform. So obviously, when I say that, there is one more point which will come as a part of it, Krish. It's basically something where, we delete the data in the on-premises. We can physically destroy the storage device, but in the cloud, how can we do that?
Because in cloud we don't have a control.
Indeed, for sure. We don't have option for basically going to the provider's data center and take an axe and crush it out, right? So what we do is that we have to make sure that we follow a proper encryption-based erasure mechanisms like crypto shredding, or we can do like means by default now almost every cloud service providers give us the option for that. If you go to AWS, we call it as envelope encryption. That
Hmm.
concept is called as envelope encryption. The same is in Azure as well. If you follow that properly, if you make sure that that is happening in a proper way, up to an extent, we can ensure that we have a proper security.
Okay,
Yep, that's it.
that is a good point you have said, because not everyone has a visibility on that level. That's
Yes,
a good point.
exactly.
Yeah.
Indeed, for sure. So I just want to, like give you an overview about some multiple cloud services we have in the AWS cloud platform, but we have similars in other cloud platforms as well.
Hmm.
So first of all, I just want to start with something called as a Amazon S3. Like in
Okay.
my whole experience, I have seen that when somebody says that they are using cloud, or they are using AWS for some reason, I'm sure they will be using Amazon S3 as a part of it, because it's one of the world's most used object storage. If you
Okay.
see the top vendors in the world like Netflix, Kellogg's, if you see anyone, they will use Amazon S3, and that's the reason why you see there's a lot of attacks happening also there.
Okay.
So it's actually object storage service where we are not able. It's like your Google Drive, but in Google Drive it's a very basic thing where you don't have a location preference or you don't have any control there. But if you go to Amazon S3, it's basically where we can have a precise location preference. We can have a proper encryption and key management. We can have an access control. We can have a bucket policies for restricting access to the Amazon S3. We can
Hmm.
have a lifecycle management. It's a very beautiful, one of the best cloud services ever, which can provide you with the object storage service.
Okay. And any use case?
Indeed, for sure. Like for example, it can be used for storing anything. It can be used for storing website backend files. It can be used for storing media files, backup files, video files, or if you want to store some log files. For all these things, Amazon is the best storage. Like it's like more of a scenario where you don't want to store any kind of continuously modifying dynamic contents. If you want to store static contents, this is the best thing. Let me give an example. Now you want to store your application log files, or database log files, or database backup files, or archive files, etc. in cloud platform, and this is the best one we can go for. It can basically offer you with different type of storage. Inside the subcategories are there, which will help you to properly store your data in a proper secure way if you configure
Okay.
it accordingly.
That's great. That's a good point.
Yes.
Okay.
In
And,
fact, I just one thing. Sorry, Prabha, just one more thing I want to add here is that I'll show you a website here. Okay. Now, this was one of my clients very long back. Just want to show you an example. That's why. See, this company is basically selling stock photos.
hmm.
Means if you want to buy a picture, you can buy this from them like a Shutterstock. Okay, so what happens? I just search image here. I download this. They have nearly 300 million images approximate, I guess. So all these images, if they store in a volume storage or a kind of a storage which is part of the
But
operating
if I want to, from layman perspective, I want to ask you, volume storage and object storage,
okay,
what is the thin line difference? Because as I said, it's not necessary that everyone is from a same vertical. And
exactly.
I sometimes, when I was teaching CCSB initially, I was also get confused on that area.
Okay,
So can you just give me any example with a reference of
okay.
explaining the thin line difference between the object storage
And volume
and
storage.
volume
Okay.
storage? Yeah.
Yeah. If you want to, I'll just first of all discuss the use
Before
case.
going to explain technically.
Yeah. So if you want to store an app, if you want to install an application, if
Hmm.
you want to do a continuous editing of some files, if you want to record a continuous video, if you want to do something like dynamic contents like this, or if you want to access via operating system, if you want to, like if you want to do a live editing of something, if you want to perform these kind of activities, then we have to go for a volume storage. Like you
Okay.
cannot install something in object storage. For if you want to install anything, if you want to partition like your C drive, D drive, if you want to partition like that, if you want to install something, it's obviously volume storage you have to go for.
Okay.
But at the same time, if you want to store some static contents, like for example, I want to share a file with some million people, I can
Hmm.
put that file in object storage. I want to basically store some data for a long term which I can access via a URL or an API. I can put it in the object storage. If
Okay.
I want to store some website, see this website contain all their pictures, videos, and every backends in the object storage, like that.
That's great.
That's a static content, right? So this website is hosted on EBS volume, where they are installing it on EBS volume. But in the reality, in the backend, they are storing all their pictures, movies, and videos on the object storage, like Netflix do. That's it.
Okay.
Yep.
That's great.
Yep.
And volume?
When you basically go for a volume, right? See, volume is basically where they install programs, as I said,
Hmm.
like install
Hmm.
applications and programs. They install in the volume storage.
Hmm.
So now you're saying, Krish, we want to, we will mutually edit a file. I want to open a file and I want to edit the file together for all of us. We cannot
Hmm.
basically use that for a object storage. We have to go for a volume storage there, because object storage is designed for storing data and sharing it to people. It's not about modifying. That's it.
Okay. That's great.
Yeah. And
So,
just one more
yeah.
thing, sorry, Prabh, one more thing to add is that, see, in Amazon S3 itself, we have different types of different use cases. Like it's not something which I'm going to discuss now. I'm just giving an example. So, like, some people want to have a storage where they want to immediately access the data. Some
Hmm.
people want to keep it for a long time, but they don't want to immediately access. Some
Hmm.
people want more performance. Some people want means multiple, multi-zone replication. So
Hmm.
based on their different use cases, the AWS or Azure or the cloud service providers offers different storage types, or we can say storage tiers, for every use case we are having.
Okay.
That's
Yeah, I
one
can
of
see
the
the
best things.
active data with changing frequent and
Yes.
cost also vary, right?
For sure, like cost can seriously vary. For example, if I take a simple example here, if I want to store 10 terabyte of data in Amazon S3 standard, let's suppose they are costing me around $128. The same thing if I store it in S3 Glacier Deep Hardware, it will be like less than $10.
Hmm. Oh, okay.
It can be a serious cost difference for sure.
And out of falling, which one is more popular? Like, I know everyone has
Use
their own
case.
use case, but from the popularity point of view, which is
Always
frequent?
S3 standard, and second is Glacier.
Okay.
Yep.
Fine.
Yep.
So, what is the next thing? So, we're going to discuss how to create or what exactly?
Yeah, I'll just show you an example of volume object storage and how to access an object via object storage for sure.
Done. Done.
So first of all, this is my AWS console, and I'm in the Mumbai region. And if I go to Amazon S3,
Hmm.
this is a Amazon S3 here. It's and the word says simple storage service. It's as simple as that. It's very simple to access and use. So here, what we can do is that I can simply create something called as a bucket here. If I want, I can simply create a bucket here. I just click on
Okay.
create
Bucket
bucket.
is just like a Google Drive file, a Google Drive
Exactly.
folder.
It's a container. That's it.
Hmm.
So basically, I'm creating a bucket called as, like this name must be unique worldwide. If you go to Azure, there is no problem. In AWS, this name must be unique worldwide. So I'm
Okay.
giving a name called as a, demo, Krish, Prabh, just an example. And I can choose where I want to create my storage. If you go to Google Drive or any kind of a public-based services kind of that, you don't have option for choosing this. But here, I know where my data is exactly stored. Now they are saying my data is in Mumbai.
Okay.
Then I can set the permissions for who can access the particular files. I can set permission for how can I basically give public access to the contents. I can basically enable something called as a versioning, which is, a massive capability, which we need to have a whole session for explaining.
Okay.
Then we can follow the encryption there. See, this by default, any object you're storing in Amazon S3 will be encrypted, especially
Okay.
from 2023 onwards. It's actually there.
Okay.
And I can create a container. It's called as a bucket. Like it's like a tub. It's like a container we are having.
Okay.
And if I open this thing, I can put any kind of file inside this. If I want, I can basically put pictures, videos, movies, whatever I want. I can basically put the files inside this as per my requirements.
Okay.
So to give you an example, I'm just putting a simple file here called as a thread. This is a picture file, and I can just simply upload the file here. And what happens once the file is uploaded, the file is there, and this file is now we call it as an object. And if I open this, you can see that for this file, I have a dedicated URL here. See,
demo Krish Prabh
yes,
s3.ap. Okay.
yeah. If I open this particular file, if I try to open this file, you will get an error side suddenly. The reason is because by default, everything you store in Amazon S3 will be private.
Okay.
So once you make the file public, it's quite easy. Just have to make the file public. Once you make the file public, millions of people can simultaneously access this file without an issue. Millions of people can simultaneously access this file
Okay.
without an issue. Just an example. Like the same way, I can store millions of objects. I can make them access to or give the access to millions of people, and I can access it via API calls or web access. So all these things are possible when you go to Amazon S3 Object Storage.
Okay.
And you can see that here, see, we have multiple options. Like we can basically create versions of the files. We can enable different kind of encryption. We can bring our own key files if I want. I can.
And we're going to discuss the encryption key management in our next video, I believe, right?
Indeed, for sure. We are going to discuss about the encryption key management.
But what is the best practice right now to manage the storage? Do you have any high level best practice? Might be this video watched by my general users who are not into IT,
Okay.
or they're into cloud. They won't know the best practice from a storage perspective. So what is the best practice to maintain the high level data security?
Yeah,
storage security.
yeah,
Bucket
always
security.
yeah, always make sure that when you basically go to encryption, when you go to a bucket, if the bucket contains sensitive data, make sure you properly encrypt it. And the best kind of encryption we can go for is something called as a SSE KMS, or service and encryption with key management service. So in that case, the benefit, I'm just giving a high level only. The benefit is that we can bring our own keys if I want. I can create my own key. I can use that key file to encrypt the data in the cloud platform. That gives you more confidence actually.
Okay.
In fact, there is a scenario where, like, if you see that, Krish, I'm having a company where I already have a vendor who is managing my keys. I can connect that particular third-party key management tool also to AWS Cloud Platform with this. If I use this AWS KMS like that, and I can go for replication. This is something which I wanted to explain in this video because, like, many people ask the question that, Krish, we have to store this, log files and all for next 1 year, 2 year, like as per the compliance requirements. But how do I manage the life of these particular files? And if you want to manage the life of this particular file, this is the best option. They will automatically manage the life of the files. So all I have to do is that I have to tell them from the date a file is created till particular date, we have to keep the file. After this particular date, this file must be going to the archival storage. And after that particular date, it must be deleted. Like, I can make a proper lifecycle rule there, and it will happen automatically. We don't have to worry about anything there. They will take care of all the headaches for us.
Okay.
That's one major
But
thing.
why we need this? Why we have this life cycle? Because if we talk about the on-prem data, we don't follow this life cycle and all that. So,
but then how do you manage it? Like, for example, you have millions of files, and how do you basically ensure that each file is basically have reached the end of life? Let's suppose daily we have some 10,000 files get created daily, and basically how do I know that which file has to be deleted after 1 year? Like, I don't have a visibility, right? So this particular thing will keep a track of your files, and exactly that from the date you upload the file or the file get created, they will give up, as per our policy, they will delete or they will move to a different kind of storage, etc. automatically for us.
And this basically come with the perspective is that, okay, if tomorrow we have a cost associated with every data, right? That is also the reason that
major reason.
are,
yes, major reason. As you said, like, those data which you keep without any use can always be a liability for the company. Obviously.
Understood.
That's it. Yep. And one more thing is that now this is something which, even though they have introduced recently only, but I feel which is very important, called as a object lock. Like, for example, now let's suppose that I'm working in an organization where I got in a legal hold. let's suppose the court has ordered us that, okay, this data must not be tampered or this data must not be done anything until the court, agrees to that. So in that case, this is option we have to go for. If you go for this object lock and if you enable the object lock, you will definitely be able to make sure that your data won't be modifiable by anyone, or nobody can delete it, nobody can modify it. Your data becomes completely frozen state. This is what
Okay.
we call as object. It's a major feature which Amazon introduced, and many
Why we
companies.
need that when the data get in frozen state? Why we need that?
Okay, I'll give an example. Now let's suppose that the court is ordering that, okay, this data must be kept for next, until this case is over. You have to make sure this data is particularly safely kept in the cloud platform. But what happens if one of your employee delete the data accidentally, or as per the lifecycle policy you have said the data get deleted? So for some reasons this happens. At the end of the day, it's going to make your company into a lot of trouble because it's a legal case.
Okay.
So by following this, by making this object lock, whatever happens until unless that particular case is over, and until that person removes the object lock, nobody can basically modify the file or delete the file. We can make sure that we have a proper security for that.
Okay.
Yep.
That's
Like
great.
that.
Okay.
Like we have a lot of features here, like we can log all the activities, we can continuously do a monitoring there, and this is basically we can set the permissions if you know how to write a proper JSON policy. In fact, this is something which I like a lot, because it's very easy to write this policy. If you know how to write a JSON bucket policy or JSON policy here, I can very clearly control the access to my bucket, to who can access, what level he can access, and everything.
Okay, that's great.
That's something which I want to explain in high level about the Amazon S3. This is just a starting. We have a lot of features on that. This is just a high level which I'm discussing here.
Thank you, Krish, and it was a great insight, at least for me also, because the pointers you're talking about, the database practices and all that, give me the a great resource. So thank you so much for your insight. And can we have another video to be recorded on storage encryptions?
Indeed, for sure. Like that is something which I always allow to do that for sure. Yeah, we can
And
do
one
it.
more important thing, is it possible if you have a time, can you show the volume storage also? Like,
Yeah, for sure. In AWS, the volume storage is called as a EBS storage, EBS
okay,
storage. But
okay,
again, here also we have a different use case. It's not like one cup of one shoe for everyone. That's basically like that volume size and the volume type, performance, and everything can vary. Like some people say that they want to have a hard disk. Some people say they want to have an SSD. Some people say they want to have a lesser performance. They want to have more performance. Based on every use case, the cloud service providers now offering you different kind of a storage. And to
okay,
show you a demo on that, I will go to the service called as a EC2, which is where we can access the volume storage. And if I scroll down to the left, we can see that there is a section called as a volumes.
okay.
So I click on this, and here you can see that I can create a volume storage here. Just a minute. See, I can create a volume storage here, and I can select in what level of performance I want. Do I want to have an SSD or a hard disk, whichever I want. So it's completely up to me.
Okay.
And I can define the size of it. Like for example, if I'm saying that the size is, let's say I will create a 1 GB now, but you can basically go up to 16 TB, some 64 TB, etc. And I can basically encrypt if I want also here, and I can create a volume here. That's it.
And in that case, it can be associated with any instances, right? So
Indeed,
it's
for sure.
okay.
Yep. But if you go to object storage, this is the major difference. If you go to object storage, you can directly access it via URL. But if you want to
Okay.
access a volume storage, we have to first of all attach it to an instance, and then only through the OS we can access it, the data inside that.
Understood.
Yes.
Understood. That's another important insight you said about correlations and all that, and that give the better visibility also.
Yes.
Thank you. So we're making another video on storage level encryption once we get a time. And team, do let us know in a comment box what are the next video shall be made apart from storage encryption with Krish on AWS, or do we want to make a one video on little comparison between the both topics? So that can be also done parallelly. So thanks, Krish. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Prabh. Thank you so much.
But before we going wind up, I just want to understand. Do you have any last minute pointer?
Like it's the same thing for most services. Choosing the proper service is most important when you go to a cloud platform. In fact, it's not like I will go to AWS or Azure. Choosing the proper provider, choosing the proper specific service for your use case is most important for securing your data, for your compliance, for many reasons. So make sure you understand every service based on the provider's documentation. You refer to every service and learn it in a proper way before choosing the service. Else, it can lead to a lot of consequences. In fact, that's one major reason reason why many companies, as we said before when we started, like many companies come back to on-premise because they lack this visibility.
Okay.
That is something which we have. That's the most important thing I want to explain to everyone. That's it.
That's great. Thanks. And thank you so much, Krish. And we'll keep in touch for our next video. And we will basically see how we can able to optimize the next session in better way. So it
Indeed.
can give it. And that today, the way you shared the insight about the things and all that, I truly feel that, okay, that can be worth for everyone who watching this video. And we'll basically see how we can how we can basically use this process to improve the functions, and how we basically take the steps further, how to validate the things and all that. Thanks, Krish.
Thank
And
you.
team, if you're new to the channel, do subscribe to the channel and click on the bell icon to make sure you should not miss the future videos on a similar topic. This is all from my side, Prabh Nair. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Good
team.
day. Bye.